The next core principle is you need to have a genuine intent to understand every point of view. One thing you notice about life is that there are so many different kinds of points of view. People have all kinds of points of view, different groups of people, different cultures and nations and ethnicities have all sorts of different points of view. And usually what the average person does is they just stay in their point of view, and then they criticize and judge the other points of view without genuinely caring to look at the world from the perspective of all those other people. And you need to do the opposite of that. You need to get very curious and good at jumping into other people's shoes and looking at the world from their perspective. And that's because you recognize that the world really is nothing but different points of view. There's no such thing as a understanding of the world without a point of view. And your own point of view is not the most important or the best. You recognize that. So when you recognize that, you understand that, hey, I can learn a lot from looking at the world from many points of view. And that's one of the things that you become passionate about, is exploring different points of view. The next core principle is integral thinking. You need to think integrally. And what that really boils down to is the realization that every point of view or perspective contains some kernel of truth, no matter what it is. Even some of the most atrocious perspectives, Nazism, radical Islamic terrorism, and others that you would think have no redeeming qualities, you can find a kernel of truth even in those points of view, and less radical ones especially. And so this is where open-mindedness comes in, right? You need to be able to integrate all these different points of view and bring them all together and to see, okay, what's really going on here? What's sort of the meta perspective, the meta point of view when we combine all these other points of view? What does that tell us about life? What does that tell me about myself? What does that tell us about humanity? What does it tell us about society? And so forth. And from that, you get so much more than just sticking to your own points of view and defending your own points of view. This is really the opposite of ideology and dogma. Because what ideology and dogma try to do is they try to limit your point of view and defend a rigid perspective on the world. So it's the opposite of integral, the opposite of holistic. And therefore, people with this limited perspective, they understand so much less of life than they otherwise could. And so I want you to keep this core principle in mind, that every point of view contains some truth, and it's your job to discover what that is. It's not the responsibility of the other person to tell you or convince you of that kernel of truth. For example, it's not the job of a Nazi or a radical terrorist to convince you of their truth. It's your job to go study them and discover what is the truth that they are so passionate about. What is that? And very importantly, just because you're doing this does not mean that you have to become a Nazi, of course, or a terrorist. Of course not. You're exploring points of view. You're going to be exploring hundreds of points of view throughout your whole life. That doesn't mean that you have to get married to any one point of view. In fact, integral thinking is the recognition that every point of view is partial, never the ultimate truth, always partial. So that's why we're exploring so many of them, is precisely because it's just a little piece. Think of every point of view as like a 1% perspective on reality. So 1% is not a lot. So, we need to explore hundreds of them for all those individual ones to add up to something substantial.